All right, I am going to record all the classes because, well, let's start with my name. I'm Grafton. Uh, so, says on the syllabus, Dr. Eliason, but it's graduate school, all adults. I used to love this black and white movie with Sidney Poitier in it, and it was called To Sir with Love. And, it's all about kind of mutual respect. Now, he was a high school teacher in the movie. Um, but, uh, but yeah, I always thought, um, if I want somebody to call me, Dr. Eliason, I should call you, respectfully by Mr., Ms., whatever you want to be called in your last name. And I definitely don't want to do that. So yeah, if I call a student by their first name, you should be able to call me by my first name. And I think there's this weird ego thing with people who like use titles anyway. So yeah, Grafton's good. That's my first name. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna record all these because uh so the story is I just got this class like 2 weeks ago. Um, I was scheduled for different classes. Um, but uh things happen. They need maybe one of the adjuncts fell through or something. And so um so uh I wasn't in the planning stages of this class because usually, I set the time, I set the modality of the classes, all of that. So we made this class multimodal so that everybody could participate the way they needed to. We have face-to-face here at California campus. We have synchronous people online, and we have asynchronous people who are going to watch the recording of the class. Um, and that's fine too. It's just a lot of different modalities to accommodate, but I think we can do a good job of it. Thanks for your flexibility on the time. Um, this class was first listed as asynchronous. And so a lot of people were emailing me and saying they couldn't get to the synchronous class on time. But everybody who wanted to could come by this time. So thank you for your flexibility on the time. Hopefully it is more convenient for you. And but you won't be shortchanged as far as class time. If you have a 7 o'clock class, we'll end before 7, so you can get to that 7 o'clock class on time. And we will have additional uh, class recordings online. So you'll definitely get the full class time and experience. Um, and and we meet all the criteria. I made sure of that. So 30% of any class that has a synchronous component, 30% could be online. So I think we're good. Um, but hopefully everybody's happy and hopefully we were able to accommodate everybody's needs. Um, so let's see. I think what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to tell you a little bit about, first of all, kind of my teaching philosophy. I do this in every class. If you've had me before, you already know my teaching philosophy, but it's a good one, so you can hear it again. Uh, and then um, and then I want to kind of share my own history with crisis, trauma, counseling, and apply it to this class and what we're going to learn in this class, and tell you about the class, and then we'll go over the syllabus, and then we'll stop recording and we'll do an icebreaker the second half of the class. Get to know each other. So the only part you won't see if you're asynchronous is the icebreaker, but you'll have a discussion board where you can share about yourself. So you'll be able to participate in it that way. Um, yeah, so my teaching philosophy um, really developed over a long period of time, and it's basically how I would have liked to experience education as a student. Um, so a good example of that would be in most classes, uh, if I use notes, um, I always wondered, why is a professor making me, write down all these notes when they're reading from notes? Just give me your notes. Uh, so if I have notes, I just give them to the whole class. So like when I teach theories, there's like 100 pages of notes. It's like its own little textbook. Skills, it's like 20 pages of notes. Um, this class, I don't have any notes because it's mainly I teach you a concept and then I tell you a story about it because I like learning from example. And so there aren't a lot of notes. And if there were notes, they would be drawn from the book we're going to use, which we'll talk about. Um, but that's just one example of kind of the teaching philosophy. It's one of those things that goes back to like elementary schools, like why, you know, people would get in such trouble for forgetting their yellow number 2 pencil, you know? So when I was a school counselor in an elementary school, I had a giant can of free yellow pencils for any child who forgot. And it really told me a lot about the different teachers. Some teachers thought it was wonderful. Other teachers are like, ha, you're letting them off the hook. So let's see. I always identified with the troubled child. Uh, let's uh, so yeah, my teaching philosophy is called mastery learning. And it's kind of like that idea that uh, we're going into a profession. We might not be medical doctors or surgeons, but if you were going to a surgeon, would you want to have an operation from the person who got a C or the person who got an A? you know? And so my mentality is there really shouldn't be any grades in professions where you're really dealing with people's lives. And I believe that counseling is one of those professions. People are coming to us with serious issues and life events, and we're there to help them through that experience. So, I think that the emotional component of our health and well-being is just as important as our physical component. So, you know, I wouldn't want to go to a therapist who got, bad grades. Uh, so I don't really, and I also don't like the mentality of like working for a grade. What do I have to do to get a grade? I want your motivation to be, I want to be a good therapist. That should be the motivation. Um, so yeah, I mean, even though I'm required to put grading criteria in our syllabus, mastery learning lets you work on anything until you get it right. So yeah, you have to turn things in on time, but if you make a mistake, you can correct it. You can try again. If you're making a video with a partner and you miss something or you don't do something uh, that shows that you understand the material, then you get to do it again. So, the only thing is that everything has to be done by the end of the semester. You can't wait. Everything has to be handed in on time, but you can still do it again. And you can't go past the end of the semester because, they're getting a little rigid about who we give incompletes to. You got to have like an excuse and all that. So that's mastery learning. I want you to leave this class with, the minimal required knowledge to help people through a crisis or a trauma. Now, with that being said, uh, your entire master's degree is a foundation for future learning. You're getting the basics. But later on, after you graduate, you might want to go learn more about EMDR and get an EMDR certificate, or, you might want to get, specializations in different areas. So, yeah, foundational knowledge in each of these subjects, because you're going to be going into practicum or clinical field. Maybe you're already in those. And you're going to be dealing with clients that have experienced crises and trauma. You're dealing with real clients, real people, human beings in those experiences in clinical field. Um, so the whole purpose of this class and every other class is to help you meet those clients' needs appropriately and professionally. Um, so yeah, one thing I'd like to do is to take away that fear or anxiety about grades and to substitute a motivation that, hey, I want to learn this material so I can be a good therapist. That's a hard thing to do for a lot of students because they're so used to performing for a grade. Um, but grades really should not be an issue. If you get everything done and hand it in, and there's a problem, you correct it and hand it in again. And yeah, so that's what I want kind of our motivation to be, you know. Um, there's so much emphasis on grades, maybe not enough motivation just to be a good therapist to help people. Uh, okay. Um, the other thing is that um, I didn't make up this syllabus, um, but I did choose the book. I substituted it for the book they chose. Um, but, uh, so there are a lot of assignments, but I must say, every assignment that whoever designed this syllabus um, added is valid. I went through each assignment and it's a lot, for this class. Um, I'm more kind of experiential rather than like homework. I'm more experientially focused, but you know, um, there are a lot of assignments, but with each assignment, I think you're learning a valid, might be an assessment, might be understanding the ACEs, might be understanding critical incident stress debriefing. And so what I did, I tried to supplement every assignment with a lot of resources that you can use. And they're all national recognized websites and resources and handbooks and things like that. Um, and I'd rather you read the ACEs handbook than read about ACEs in a textbook. Why not read the real thing, you know? Um, all right. So that's a little bit about my teaching philosophy. It's fine if you're asynchronous due to your scheduling or whatever. You'll get to see the whole video. But I do love getting to know students and having conversations with everybody. So I'm hoping that we can have a dialogue, with everybody who's either synchronous or here face to face. I hope that'll be a big part of our learning process, talking about some of these topics. Um, all right, so the next thing I'd like to talk about is the subject matter. And um, it's not an easy thing to talk about sometimes, trauma and crisis, because so many individuals in our society have experienced trauma and crisis. And when we look at various fields of work, um, many counselors have experienced trauma and crisis themselves. And the reason for that is somewhat obvious. It's that many individuals have experienced trauma or crisis and they've gone to a therapist and they've received really positive help and they've worked through whatever experiences they had. And now they want to give back and help others because that was such a positive experience for them. So we have a large number of individuals in our field who have experienced trauma and crisis. And, you know, I think that that's a noble thing to go into a field and try to help others as well. Uh, the caveat is that when we take a class like this, um, there may be some subject matter that might be difficult to deal with if you've experienced trauma or crises. And a lot of times, if a student uh, starts studying this subject and uh, they may be experiencing a lot of emotions. I don't really like using the word triggered. I think it's a little overused and sometimes misused. So I like to be specific about it. But if an individual is studying the subject matter, and there's some hard things to read in our book, it's difficult. Um, it's difficult going and working with clients and hearing their story. It's an emotional experience. Um, but if we experience strong emotions ourselves when we are empathic individuals, or if it creates anxiety within us, or if we're not able to let go of those stories when we go home at night and we're ruminating about them, or if we're experiencing countertransference with a client. It simply means that we might have more unfinished business to work through in therapy. So as we move through this course, you know, just be aware, of how you're feeling about subjects or stories that you read or case studies. And you know, if you need to deal with some unfinished business, it's best to do that now. I fully support, I wouldn't be going teaching counseling if I didn't buy into the counseling experience as a client. And I think everybody who becomes a counselor should experience counseling as a client at some point uh, for a number of reasons. So just be aware if you're struggling, if you're experiencing a lot of emotions or any type of symptomology, you know, go deal with the unfinished business. That's all. Um, a lot of individuals, they might look forward to this class because they want to work with this population. They may not look forward to this class um, because they might want to avoid this for whatever reason. Um, but everybody has to take it. Uh, dealing with trauma and clients who experience trauma is not an easy thing because we hear literal horror stories over and over again. And so it's not an easy thing as a therapist. But I think you know, I think it's an empathic thing. I think it's a caring thing. And it's very needed uh, in our society. So, All right, well that's my take on that part of it. Um, all right, well let me talk a little bit about how uh I became interested in um trauma and crisis. And so um and maybe it'll resonate with some of you. I just remember being a young child, and I grew up in a military family, and my father was in World War II and Korea and Vietnam, and he served in the military until after the first Gulf War. Um, One of my favorite things to do, me and my little brother, we would every Sunday morning, we'd run in and jump on his bed and we'd look at the Sunday comics and the newspaper together. And I just remember one Sunday he wasn't awake and we went and jumped on the bed and he threw us across the room. Well, you know, there wasn't a diagnosis for PTSD when I was a little child. But that's what he was experiencing, and later I understood that. And he didn't do it to be mean or anything. It was just an instinctual reaction to be woken up and startled that way. And, so as I grew older and as I learned more, uh, I could look back and see kind of the reason behind different things that happened in his life and throughout my childhood. And so um, eventually, uh, I had a lot of different interests, but eventually I ended up in counseling. And so my very first uh, practicum and internship was at a school called Scotland School for Veterans Children. And it was basically a school where if a child had lost a parent who was in the military, they could come and live at that school. And as time went on, a lot of the kids came from cities in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, and they had already lost one of their parents, and they were dealing with that. And they were dealing with moving away from home and living at a boarding school. Uh, However, um, we'll talk about this. One of our subjects will be, the military. But after the first Gulf War, when you get into Iraq and Afghanistan, um, the percentage of um, military after deployment, uh, the suicide rates rose quite a bit. And we'll talk about why when we have a class on this. Um, so I was dealing with a lot of grief and loss because many of them were from areas where there was drug or gang violence. They would lose friends because of that. Um, Sometimes grandparents had been raising them and they were older, and that resulted in grief and loss. So I ended up learning a lot about grief and loss and, about PTSD and things like that as an intern in that school. And I started running grief and loss groups. And, so that's how in my internship, I really was getting my feet wet with some of these subjects. Um, and eventually, I worked in clinical mental health and community mental health in Gettysburg, PA. And then I got a job as an elementary school counselor. Uh, and I think in both of those areas, I really didn't realize how many individuals experienced trauma, crisis, grief, loss, or a combination of those. And I think the sheer number of clients that I received, um, I think that maybe I wasn't prepared for the large numbers of clients that I was getting that had experienced these issues. And so I had a really good supervisor, and I got a lot of extra supervision and training in these areas while I was there. And eventually, um, I uh, I went back to school at Duquesne for a doctoral degree. And when I was there, um, my friend encouraged me, Mark Lepore, he's a professor here too. He encouraged me to join the Red Cross with him. And uh, most people picture the Red Cross as going to a crisis and handing out food and blankets and finding shelter. And that is most of what the Red Cross does. But there is a special program in the Red Cross uh, for licensed therapists. And but you can't just join as an LPC. You have to go through all of the training from the bottom up because you never know what you're going to run into, what crisis you're going to be experiencing. And so uh, we did that. We got all the training, and we would be called to, apartment building fires, floods. I think Mark went to Katrina. Um, so it was a really rewarding experience, even though we were experiencing horrible disasters. Um, just just the act of helping people, you know. And eventually, uh, the deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan increased, and we joined uh, a special part of the Red Cross um, that's called Reconnections, and it works with the military Yellow Ribbon program. And so we would run groups uh, for people who were coming back from military deployment. And it's called Reconnections because one of the most difficult things after a deployment is reconnecting with family uh, in the States because, you're moving from a very high tension deployment where you're fearful for your life and you're coming back to hopefully a safe environment with a family. And that's a very difficult transition. And so that's what all of the reconnection workshops were about. And we could also use it as screening if we thought people needed more help. Um, if that series of workshops wasn't enough and they needed more help, if we thought they might have suicidal ideation or other issues, PTSD. We're going to have a whole class on like PTSD and treating it. And as the years went by, the military became very good. The VA became very good at treating PTSD. The problem is that once they felt the military personnel was able to function again, they didn't remove them from active duty and deployment. They sent them back into that environment that uh, resulted in uh, multiple traumas. And then they trauma can accumulate. So cumulative trauma is much harder to treat. So if you treated one case, one instance of PTSD, and then you sent them back into, a very stressful environment, and then they were re-traumatized, that second time is much harder to treat than the first time. And it's cumulative. Some people had 3 or 4 deployments. Um, and the military doesn't really want to be treated if they want to be, if they want that as a career, they don't want PTSD on their records. So they very rarely report it. And then, the result is often self-medication or something like that. Let's see. All right. Um, so eventually, um, we volunteered at a national level, um, and uh, shootings in America became more prevalent, unfortunately. Uh, but there aren't a lot of people, uh, with a license, an LPC or another psychological license, volunteering for the Red Cross in various areas. Um, so the first shooting that Mark and I were called to, you might not remember it. It was the LA Fitness Club shooting. It was in Pittsburgh. Um, and then the next one was the Tree of Life shooting, and you probably all remember that one. And I uh, I have 3 teenage kids, and then I guess now a 7-year-old, and so that 7-year-old really pushed my retirement back, but I don't travel a lot when the kids are really young like that. So I haven't gone to many of the um, national uh, disasters or shootings or anything like that since he was born. Um, but we also talk about, we don't only work with victims or their families, but we also work with other disaster relief workers, be like, people working for the fire department or the police or the Red Cross, because they're going to these disasters and they're seeing some very stressful things, but we need to work with them as well. So we all learned critical incident stress debriefing, to work with first responders and to work with volunteers. And I'm going to teach you critical incident stress debriefing. Um, and I guess the last thing I'd like to share is that a lot of my private practice, um, I worked with all ages in it, but because I was living in a small town for a long period of time, um, they really didn't have a lot of therapists, and I was the only male therapist there. And so I got a lot of kids, mostly males, um, young children who had experienced all different kinds of abuse, uh, psychological, emotional, physical, sexual. And, I think that I can see such a difference from the time I started, which was like, I don't know, 1989, and now, and in our knowledge about how to treat trauma in individuals. And I think that, and we'll talk about it, I think the book that I'm having you read, The Body Keeps the Score, I think it's like a lot of the original research is really outlined in that book. all of the textbooks that I reviewed for this course, they quote the individuals who wrote that book. So, you know, I think I think it's a classic. I think it's timely and modern, and I think it has some of the uh, most recent scientific discoveries on the brain and how the brain works with trauma and all kinds of stuff. So it's not an easy read, but I think it's worthwhile. Um, all right. I think the last thing I want to share before we look at the syllabus is that this class is not therapy. Okay. Um, so, uh, you know, this is not the place to share your trauma. That would be in counseling, in a counseling session on your own. So everything we're going to work with is going to be a case study. Okay. Um, and some of the case studies might hit home if it's similar to something you experienced, but you know, uh, most of the case studies are going to be from the book or from one of the websites that we're using for like the ACEs or something like that. And, you know, but even though you might feel like sharing traumatic history, uh, try to stay away from that, you know? Um, I don't want to negate or invalidate or anything like that. I just want to separate this learning environment from your own counseling needs and experience. Um, and I think we have a lot of case studies that we can use. Um, yeah, I think that's it. All right, questions or comments before we move on to the syllabus? All right. Well, I did open up D2L and the updated syllabus is on D2L and unfortunately face to face um I'm going to use the equipment to show like videos and things like that. But the best way for me to record is using my laptop. So if you want, you can look at the syllabus on your own laptop. I am going to upload it and share my screen for the individuals online. But I think you'll get an idea of just me talking about it if you don't have a laptop or something with you. So, you know, we have all the normal information. We have, you know, my contact information. I think the best way to contact me is through email. I check it all the time, every day. Um, but that phone number is to my office here, and I'm not always in this office. I work here. I've been a professor here for 20 years, but I also work at St. Clair Hospital in the psychiatric unit with severe psychosis. That's in Mount Lebanon, outside of Pittsburgh. Um, so my schedule is a little hectic, but the so the textbook is The Body Keeps the Score. I emailed a link. The link is also in the announcements on D2L. I did submit this book, but remember, I only got this course 2 weeks ago. I don't know how quickly they can adopt a book through our bookstore. The good news is every book I adopt is cheap. So this is like under 12 bucks. And I couldn't believe it was like after I read this book, I'm like, how can they sell this book for 12 bucks? It's fantastic. So it is a bargain, you know, and I know you might be able to get your books through the digital thing or whatever, but you know, I also like assigning books that like, you know, I went to college. I know how many books I never looked at again after a class because they were like a general textbook. But this is one of those books that anybody interested in trauma reads. It's a book that people talk about with each other and apply and use it as a reference and go back and look at it again. Um, and the additional resource, it's not required, but that was the original textbook they wanted to use for the class. It's expensive. And, but I will see if there's some like PowerPoints or something that might supplement uh, our weekly D2L. Um, let's see what else. These are like class resources, and they're all pretty good. They're all up to date. Um, so you have kind of like the National Center for PTSD, psychological first aid. They're all really good resources that you might want to take a look at. And, basic learning objectives and K-CREP learning objectives. And AK, that's for art therapy students, their learning objectives. So the course schedule, okay, so a lot of the assignments I do use web resources for, and I did check them, but I'll check them again and make sure they work. But like there's a This American Life episode that you can listen to. Uh, this is a case study involving complex trauma. And I think there's like probably 10 discussion boards. A lot of them will have to do with like, okay, well, maybe the This American Life episode, or maybe you're going to respond to the case studies, or maybe you'll write about the readings and the book chapters for the week. Some of them are larger though. Like you will choose a partner, and we don't have to choose them right away. Uh, and you'll probably work with the same partner. I know some people prefer to work alone, but you know, you're counselors. You need to work with other people. And so, yeah, we'll have partners of either two people or three people. And round September 25th, that's when we're going to get into some of the larger assignments. Like this is the original ACEs study. I have the little book of ACEs, the CDC ACE, lots of references. And then there's an assignment that has to do with ACE. And then, you know, but we'll go over every single assignment and every one. So, like, I don't like assignments that are like busy work. Like, all of these assignments, at least, will teach you how to use like a trauma assessment and apply it to a case study. So I think they're worthwhile, you know. Um, let's see. Dun, dun. So I already told you about our grading procedure. I have to put this in there, but you know, so I was on a university-wide committee, and it looked at the outcomes for every department in the university. And I would get like submissions and departments, which I'm not going to name, say, oh, we had a 70% pass rate of our national exam. We're successful because that was their goal, 70%. And I'm like, I'm looking at that and I'm like, well, how are you going to help the other 30% of your students to succeed? I mean, come on. Like our counseling program has like a 98% pass rate on all the national exams first time, uh, which is what it should be. And then everybody else passes it the next time. But, you know, I think it reflects harshly on the educational program if you don't have student success. So, my goal is for everybody to be successful. Um, this is kind of like a little bit about all of the different assignments, psychological first aid, working with a partner to respond to a case study. And then we have, well, yeah, we have all the Tavera stuff, and we have Title IX, and here's your resources. If you have any type of disability, go to the Office for Students with Disabilities, and I'll be happy to accommodate you, whatever's needed. Um, let's see, you know, uh, integrity. It would be hard to make like an AI video of you working with each other, so I'm not too worried about that. Although it would be kind of entertaining, I guess. Uh, let's see, attendance, and then we have all these appendices, and like one is on psychological first aid for that assignment. There's a rating sheet for you and your partner. And then there's one on suicide assessment skills. And there's a ranking sheet. And so there's a lot of things at the end of the syllabus that you're going to use for your assignments. But don't worry, we're going to go over everything way before you have to work on an assignment, you know. Um, so I don't feel any need to go over the assignments because I'm going to teach, I'm going to lecture on what it is, and then I'm going to show you the resources. I'm going to open the discussion board and, you know, basically walk you through the assignment, and then you go off and work on it with your partner. So it will be gradual. Um, all right, let's see. What else? Um, yeah, I think that's it. So questions, comments. If you're asynchronous, so what we'll do, we're not going to choose partners tonight, but we will choose them in the next week or two. So you can choose your own partner if you know somebody. Um, or somebody just looks like a cool partner. And, or, will, if you don't have a partner that you want, then I'll just randomly assign people. I'll try to assign people face to face together, synchronous together, asynchronous together. That usually works the best because it's easier to communicate that way. But okay, questions or comments? All right. So it's 5:50. We're gonna take a 10-minute break till 6 o'clock. Then we're gonna come back. We're gonna do our icebreaker and kind of introduce yourselves to the class. All right.